Okay. Yay. Okay, I see people. Hi. Okay, I see Charles and Nancy.
All right.
Oh, I see Kim. Hi,
Hello, everybody.
hi,
Hi,
Debbie. Hi,
people.
Brad. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
And
Okay, I
Sid, John
see
Johnson. Sid. Oh, hi,
President.
Linda.
All right. Oh, I see Kim. Hello, everybody. Hi,
Oh,
Debbie.
sorry.
Hi,
Hello,
Brad.
hello.
Hi,
Hiding off
Kim.
camera, but I couldn't
I'll
miss.
stop saying hi to everyone.
Oh, hi,
Yep.
Linda. All right.
Hiding off camera, but I couldn't.
I'll stop saying hi to everyone. I have a weird thing happening here.
I think you need to mute your speakers on your computer.
And I'm going to say hi to more people.
All right, let's see if that fixed it. Okay. All right, third time's a charm.
Yay. No rush, no rush. My husband better be here. I don't see him, and I know for a fact he's downstairs. Somebody text Andy. Somebody get Andy on the phone, Rick. I'm looking in your direction. Debbie, I would appoint you, but I don't think you have Andy's number.
All right. Welcome everybody to the Nebraska Poets Reading Series featuring Maria Nazos. We are thrilled to have all of you with us today, and we are live streaming this on YouTube. So you will be able to find it there later if you want to watch it again, because you know you will want to see it again. So for those of you that are new to the Nebraska Poetry Society, I will let you know a little bit about what we do. We promote our Nebraska poets, as we were doing this evening with Maria Nazos, and we provide high-quality workshops that are accessible to all. We are an official 501c3 organization relying on your donations to fulfill our mission, and we thank you for your support. We do have a Nebraska Poets Reading Series on the first Tuesday of every month, always at 6:30, always virtual, always free and open to the public. In March, we will feature Kim Sosin, who I believe is here. She can wave at us, and she helped me start the Nebraska Poetry Society back in October of 2020. So I'm super excited to have her featured next month. And in April, we will have Todd Robinson, who is a mainstay here. If you are familiar with the education scene at UNK. And in May, we will have one of my mentors, Dr. Chuck Peak, who's also here with us if you want to give a wave. He is a big influence on me in my early years of writing. So I'm thrilled also to feature him in May. We also do a poetry workshop, always on a Saturday, always at 10 a.m., always virtual, and they are free to all members. Membership is only $40 a year, and scholarships are available to anybody. It's just a click on our website. In February, which is this coming Saturday, we will have Ali Acedo, who's going to be talking about the language of desire, poetry, and the human need to be known. In March, we will have Allison Lubar, who's going to talk about the sonnets from past to present and future. And in April, we will have M. Mick Powell, who's going to talk about writing about the dead and the dying. Grief is a very popular topic, so we're super excited to have all of those, and we hope you can join us. We do have some some live things that are happening, but the big thing I want to put out there is that we will start our qualifiers soon for the Slam, where we will be selecting the Slam poet to represent Nebraska at Nationals, and Nationals will take place in Kansas City this year as part of the Blackberry Peach National Slam qualifier. So we will be doing that soon. Sign up for our newsletter and pay attention to our website so you can be in the know and be a part of that. But this is why we are all here. We are all here to hear from Maria Nazos, and she grew up in Athens, Greece, and Joliet in Illinois. Her work has been published in the New Yorker, Tri-Quarterly, World Literature Today, and elsewhere. She's the author of poetry collection Pulse, which is coming out soon, and there is a link to pre-order in the chat. If you don't see it, I'll repost it. And the translation collection, The Slow Horizon That Breathes, from the poet Dimitra Kotulia. Is that how you say it?
Petula. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Long listed for the Angelo Hellenic League Runciman Award.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maria has worked almost every job, including as a whale watch boat attendant, table dancer, teacher, barista, sunglass salesperson, bartender, and probably the worst waitress in the entire history of the Eastern Seaboard. If she spilled Pinot Noir on you, she apologizes. We are thrilled to have her with us this evening. And for those of you that have attended this before, our format is a little bit different. She's going to read for us some of her work for about 10 minutes. And while she does that, you guys are going to post your comments and questions in the chat, and then we'll break and I'll read all of those for her. And then she'll read again and we'll ask more questions and so forth. Are we ready?
I sure am.
All right, take it away, Maria.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, I do apologize to many, many different people on the Cape whom I'm sure I've spilled a lot of wine on. And you'll also see a lot of my different jobs from my past lives popping up in my poems as well. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for being here and coming. I just can't even tell you the joy it gives me as I scroll through Zoom and I see your wonderful pictures and or your faces. Okay, so I'm gonna start with this poem entitled "We Bury a Gecko at 3 a.m. After Drinking Too Much White Rum." Because who hasn't, right? "Let's have a funeral," I said, urging you out of bed. We placed the body in a bowl of earth, his star-shaped claws pointed everywhere, his pale green intestine visible through his belly. You scraped the dirt with a spatula and said, "You're crazy." But I was eased by the fact that there were plenty crazier. The group of surfers who lived in a grass-thatched hut had told me the night before that every powerful lineage of humans carries reptilian DNA and lives below the earth. I believed them because I needed to be believed. I was piecing back my sanity after a man back home had slid behind me from shadow to shadow until I found him hiding in my house. Now that I'd finally been heard, I was ready to bury the story that had gone unexamined, just filed away in the small town police station. I hadn't yet lost others to heartless disease, so this small loss of a lizard on that tinier island was big enough to mourn as one of my own. And as you sprinkled a fistful of soil on its diamond-shaped head, I bowed, strangely sober, ready to accept this grief when, to our speechless surprise, the tawny body writhed like a starfish, surged out of the hole, and went flashing off into the jungle. So it's for anyone who's stayed up late in Costa Rica. Okay, so for this one, and forgive me, I do kind of love to patter beforehand. Yeah, this one goes out to all the poets, not just all the poets, but all the writers and the visionaries, because without getting to what's the word? I don't want to bog anyone here down with what's already bogging you down. However, just it's a PSA. Just remember to always do the good work. And this is kind of what that's about. Breathe hard, sing deep, and bring it on home is what this is titled, and it's dedicated to the recording artist Ray LaMontagne. When he hears Stephen Stills for the first time, he drops a shoe onto the conveyor belt, puts on his frayed top hat, runs out of the windowless factory to ride his 10-speed home, and begins to sing, molten voice exploding from his diaphragm. All those years of growing up, dragged through landlocked states by a mother who treated him like a million bricks sewn into the hem of her dress, all those years of sun-kissed women he lay beneath, all those years of being the boy you never noticed, did he not break your heart? All those years now rumble up from his throat at the kitchen table. Years later, he's on stage in theaters that grow bright with an ever swelling audience. And maybe we're afraid those beams might wash out the world. And so we wave our tiny torches. But when I hear that voice, it fans flames. Smoke churns up from my throat's chimney. So, Ray, I'll sing through concrete walls of every day into brassy strains of light through the sweaty, soggy night. I'll breathe hard, we all will, and sing deep in words that search for a home. And when I find it, I'll plant my feet and bags on the ground in this life and whatever little music I make. So it's a reminder to keep making that little music, because whether or not it's little, it's going to be big to somebody else. Okay, trigger warning before I read this poem for mentions of domestic violence. And this is, in fact, about a waitress, but it's less funny and cheery, as you may have already assumed, than my bio. This one is a pantun, which was my jam, and it's titled Waitress in a Small Town Seaside Tavern. Maybe a surfboard hitter, you say, though folks whisper, her man beats her, and there are no waves today. Her eye is black and sealed like a shutter. We've all heard, her man, he beats her. Still we look at her and then look away. Her eye is sealed like a shutter. And there are no waves this week. The sea is calm today. We glance at her and then quickly look away. As evening darkens the gray-green sea, since the ocean is calm today, we drink, she brings us 2 more whiskeys. Evening falls across the sea. She lowers the lights, and now the bar is dark too. She brings us another round of whiskeys. Now her bruise looks less black, more blue. With the lights lowered, the bar's dark too, so we can hardly see the mark. Her bruise looks less black and more blue. You say, maybe it's just a shadow. It's getting dark. Now we can barely see her mark as her man sits down with their boy in a booth. You say, see, it's a shadow. Outside, suddenly it's dark. And she sags across him and slips off one shoe. The man sitting with their son in the booth. He reaches over and strokes her face. She meets his gaze and slips off her other shoe. Yet her body is stuck as if stuck, yet her body is stiff as if stuck in an invisible embrace. Her man sits with her son in the booth. Maybe a surfboard hit her, you say again hopefully. But I see she's stuck in an invisible embrace. And there are no waves today. So thank you, thank you. Okay, so this is another happy poem. Totally not autobiographical, but the speaker was about to jump like almost 200 feet over Chiang Mai, Thailand, when like she realizes her relationship is screwed. So haven't we all been there? Okay, this one is titled Bungee Jumping. Before the woman leaps off of the 160-foot platform, she sees the tear-colored ghost of her body. Far below, a man watches from the ground. He's gracefully hauled her sweaty backpack, weighed down by novels and heavy crocheted dresses bought for her by the man before him. He has come this far, but will not ascend the platform to jump with her, despite her brief begging. He puts a bandana over his eyes, either to shield the heat or hide from his fear of what happens next. She calls down for him to come up, but he won't. Whether he's too wise or weak remains to be seen. Whether she's careless or fearless is beside the point. The point is this: from that height, it's so bright, she can see the city below her toes. And suddenly she's jarred back into her body that is my body. mine and mine alone. Now I am back looking down at you, back to that time of perfect paralysis. It doesn't matter what sadness happened from there, how your pool exerted too much gravity, and how I wanted you to ascend to greater heights. So when it came time to jump alone, the distance between us had become natural as air, but sad as a last breath. So I took that breath and I begged the assistant behind me, just push me, push me, push. So, but hey, the bungee cord worked. I'm an eternal optimist. Okay, so this one is an oldie but a goodie, I guess. I don't know. It was from a writing residency in Vermont. This one is titled Tits and Violin. When the guy in the bar says that he loves nothing more than tits and violin in that order, and I don't punch him, I know I felt mellowed with age like a fading chord. Part of me misses that song of frank honesty. Somewhere along the way, I began to tune my off-key instincts to play smoothly into conversation. Sometime between my 30s and desire for my mouth to stop tasting of my foot soles, I began to say the fourth or fifth thing that came to mind instead of launching the first mouth missile. I once asked my cousin, "How is the whole rehab thing going?" and watched her face crumple like a cellophane flower. When a friend in college put down my boyfriend, I said unruffled, "At least he hasn't given me chlamydia." I've used words to dig myself out of long, constrictive silences, which is why I feel myself doing it even now. This man who loves the symphony of a woman's shape, who loves the violin. I could tell him to get lost. I could tell him that he isn't using the most resourceful approach to getting laid. But instead, I let the woman up front say what I can't and play her rolling bluegrass song for myself and every idiot who's ever bothered to be human. And thank you. And Charlene, just let me know whenever you'd like me to do the QA thing. I'll just kind of keep an eye out. Okay. So let's see. So among one of my many jobs that Charlene was mentioning earlier was a sunglass salesperson. That was interesting. And sometimes you run across interesting people too, who are also geographically inept and kind of racist. So this one is titled Sunglass Girl's Lament. The woman stumbled back to the store drunk, like a statue uprooted from its stump, demanding to have me arrested for lying. These sunglasses say made in Japan, and you said Italy. The fucking Chinese made them. Quipping to her that one of the largest Chinese populations actually lives outside Florence will do no good. Explaining that Italians make sunglasses in Japan, a place that is distinctly separate from China, won't land well either. But her money makes her the Statue of Liberty, and in this town there are registers everywhere. The only dialogue is the mechanical ching of the drawer, then the rustle of $20 bills. I was sure I would stay in Costa Rica, make $2 an hour, and live in a grass-thatched hut, drink hot white rum in a split pineapple with expats until the tether of time broke and one day slipped past the next like lovers before dawn. I was going to freeze my credit cards, tap out my savings, but the dollar's lunar pull brought me back and forces me to say to this woman, "I'm sorry, Japan. Later, I'll pretend to hide behind the glass display and polish designer lenses until they gleam like bubbles that refuse to burst. Huff them until I can see my unbreathed future. I'm breaststroking up through tropical waters, arriving tired to where the Statue of Liberty awaits. and I'll throw my arms around her thick trunk and whisper in her ear, I love you because I have no choice. And I know that there is at least one person here, my wonderful friend Bill Berry, who knew me and remembers when I worked in the Provincetown sunglass store. So it's so funny and wonderful that we can just both see each other and be here now. Okay. So this one speaks to the current political situation. It's very angry. It's titled Overheard Proselytizing Dreadlocked Man's Guzzle. America, you're a junkyard dog, barely housebroken, rich owner shaking his useless finger. You snarl, but your chains are golden and they can't stop shaking. Thermometers split open, windows melt. God's taken up golf. He's swinging his club with so many white men and it can't stop shaking. Folks with accents are shipped off like cheap spices. You're in America. Speak English, they tell Jamaicans. My head is heavy, but it won't and it can't stop shaking. I watch these majesties, these purple mountain majestic skies. I need a drink and the sky is purple here in Hoboken and I can't stop shaking. My eyes bleed when they take in too much beauty. Even the sun barely recognizes the world. It's fevered and chilled and can't stop shaking. I see bodies like petals littering the streets, the fire extinguisher's glass, store windows, your bones, they're all broken and they can't stop shaking. And every time our president's mouth opens, he pukes a red carpet. Talk is cheap and his tongue drips arcade tokens, and yet it can't stop shaking. Orange monster, highlighter man, you squeak through passages of lies. Our lives are dice. In the casino, you can't even keep open, and yet can't stop shaking. Last week, 60 people were mowed down like bushes of roses, their silence like lips that have spoken and can't stop shaking. Sinead O'Connor is crying in a hotel down the block and barely hanging on. Even she is penniless and alone, and she can't stop shaking. You say I'm crazy. Hendrix said life is crazy. We were riding an iridescent butterfly, and now the wings are stuck in mid-motion, and yet they can't stop shaking. Drowned islands of frogs and debris, the winds keep pummeling them. Here in this country, if your English is broken, they won't let you stop shaking. Maria, can you hear me? Stop playing a walk-on in white men's movies. You walk steady, but your body is frozen, and I see you, and you can't stop shaking. Thank you.
That's a good place to pause. That was beautiful and strong, Maria. Some of the phrases that you have in there, the way you use shaking, both for the rage, for the fear, for the trauma, the disruption. That's, yeah, I really like that. I'd like to see that written out.
Yeah.
Is that in the new book?
Oh, yeah, all of it is. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. We got to, all right, everybody, pre-order.
Yay.
Okay. Deborah has a couple comments on it. Eyes bleed when I can't take in too much beauty. That was a beautiful line. English is broken. They won't let you stop shaking. That's just the fear. My head is heavy, but it can't and won't stop shaking, Mark says. So do you just want to comment on that repetition and how that came together for you?
Sure, absolutely. Well, anybody who writes guzzles knows they're a huge pain in the ass to write. And it's interesting because everyone, well, not everyone, but many people have said to me, well, it's repetition and you like the pantoum and no, what is so difficult for me about the guzzle, but when finally you nail it and you do it right, is that it creates that sense of repetition, except the repetition is more of like an obsessive hook of a song or something like that, which actually makes a lot of sense because the guzzle was initially meant to be sung. And so it was meant to be sung and sort of like have the listener and also the speaker collapse into a pile of ecstasy and whatever you want to call it. But one of the things I realized was that by using not just the repetition at the end, but a word with that echoing internal rhyme, that what happens is it starts to get buried in the back of the reader's brain. And then, bam, when you go to the next couplet, it creates this kind of oral surprise and yet familiarity. And then you've got further the repetition that kind of locks the couplets together, even though they are meant to be in disunity. It's another neat thing about the form.
Yeah, I found myself looking, listening for the next repetition and how it was going to change, how it was going to transform, because you used it to represent, like I said, fear and anger and, disruption and trauma. And so, I mean, shaking didn't represent the same thing each time, which was beautiful. Okay, so at the very beginning, there was a comment about there's going to be, oh, here it is from Linda. This is going to be an evening of great poem titles. So, so I don't know if you want to comment on how you title your.
Sure, sure thing. So a couple of different people, and I want to make sure that I attribute the credit where it ought to rightfully go. I remember a friend telling me that Yusuf Komunyaka said that a title shouldn't just be a little hat at the top of the poem. And the other thing that I remember that when I studied back when I was getting my MFA with Suzanne Gardnier, who's wonderful, she said something similar, and she said, you're very much one just to stamp labels on poems. Like the title is always like stamp, it's a label, right? Like I don't know, we bury a lizard in Costa Rica, or we're drunk and we bury, or something like that, like something that's extremely obvious. And one of the things that I began realizing, and I encourage everyone to do this if they haven't tried it, and if you're my student, I made you do this too, to kind of break out of that paradigm, of thinking really concretely, like stamp, I'm going to slap a title on this bad boy, and instead thinking of the title is being that thing that either resolves the riddle that is the poem or brings out some kind of a paradox or something like that. Suzanne gave me an exercise and she said, just start pulling out phrases, start having fun, pull out phrases, make plays on those phrases, and see what happens as you try on each one as the title. And what I found from there is that I was really able to shift my consciousness. So I went from kind of thinking about lizard poem, like in this really, really concrete way, to making this metaphorical and paradoxical leap as well. So, and it's a lot more fun that way, I think.
That is fantastic. I'm going to start doing that. I love that.
So fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Mark's like the line, whether too wise or weak remains to be seen in one of the earlier poems. And Kim and Charlene both like mouth missile. And Deborah, there was a lot of really good lines in that. Deborah said, "Mouse, stop tasting my foot soles." I also really like that. I let the woman up front say what I can't, and then like lovers before dawn. So that one had a really great, just the way you use the diction around music, and that poem was fantastic. And you said that's an older poem, right?
Tits and Violin. Oh yeah, it's probably the oldest poem in the collection. I think it's, wow, God help me. I think it's 14 years old. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it has stood the test of time. Deborah says, every poem you read was so elaborate with imagery. How it was you read, your tone, your cadence allows the reader to absorb the words without seeing it written on the page. I would like for you to talk about how you read versus how you write. That's kind of an ongoing, every poet has a different view of that. What is yours?
Right, yeah. So I remember back when I was an undergrad and I would read poems, and I just remember being really sad because one common piece of feedback I got, and as we know, it's the feedback that often makes us sad or like upsets us that tends to be the most useful. And it was that people had felt that when I'd read something aloud, it sounded really powerful or fierce, and it just didn't hold up on the page. And I really took that to heart. And to quote the wonderful show Ted Lasso, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. So after I got super annoyed, I started to realize, like, okay, yeah, let's go back and think about this. And it didn't happen overnight, but I began to realize like that, and I say this, like all my students are hearing me repeat myself, but yes, the poem has to be able to stand up on the page as much as it does being read aloud. And so I began to think a lot about that. And of course, like I said, it happened gradually, but one thing kind of inform the next. So for example, learning how to do line breaks, learning how to do form, learning about like the little oral surprises, not just the repetition of the guzzle, but where to put like a rhyme and where to throw the reader's ear off and when to pause where there's a line break. And there's all these other really strange, cool sonical things that I think about and pay attention to. So for example, if you're reading and a poem has a full stop, like punctuation at the end, that's going to be extra long. A stanza break is going to be extra long. And then an enjambment goes a little faster. So I began having fun kind of like manipulating and playing with those pauses and everything like that, and then paying attention to the line and meter. And yeah, just from there, I got a lot more relaxed. And I think that when those different things kind of braid together and inform one another, feeling comfortable in my own skin, feeling good about what I do, enjoying engaging people, knowing the craft, I just think naturally all those things are going to come together and kind of like inform the way that I convey my work.
Well said. Beautiful. All right, let's hear some more poems. And Rick, that will give you some time to type in the question you want to type in. All right.
Oh, good. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Definitely, Rick. Okay. So, once again, trigger warning. This one's a fiery poem. Woman to woman. At the old colony tap, she and I are having one of those uneasy talks that women will have when no one else will listen. Her ex, who is my ex, is in jail, pacing past bars until he is released. For the umpteenth time, and while we inhale cigarette after cigarette over the subject of him, though I'm trying to stamp out my past, that's smoldering behind me. Look, I say, quoting Kunitz, exhaling smoke from my fourth cig. There is this thing inside him that won't stop chewing you, but there's still time to run before you see what he's done. I tell her this, but she's too hopeful to hear. I heard what you did, she says. You called the cops after he broke into your house. She's like this, all hungry and hopeful. I am that woman who will always have patrol lights reflected in my eyes. Going back, I say, lighting up again. Going back is like climbing into a burning building and saying, I know that the smoke alarms work. Her eyes the color of wheatgrass, gloss with tears as she says, maybe this time he won't need to heat every room with rage. Maybe he can change temperature to one that falls below a hungered pitch that propels his fists. No, I say, you have to snuff him out for good. His smoke will choke every doorway, brand pieces inside you that you can't even see. Honey, he'll stain your brain with searing handprints until you're half insane. She protests. Maybe this time it's different. And then I know it's all hot air I'm huffing. I can do nothing to yank her from this hazy maze. The bartender sets two more drinks before us. What if, she continues, stubbing out a butt, what if I go back, but this time I know where the fire escapes are? Sister, I think. Oh, sister. I want to say so much, but I inhale those words like a dragon in reverse. Sigh out one last warning. Dear girl, he will never let you go. Break a window or your bones. Jump out of your skin if you need to. Crawl your ass across splintered glass. Steal a door for all I care. Just woman, please leave while you can still breathe. Before you're surrounded by smog so deep, you can't even begin to see what you've become now that he's done. Thank you. And this one, once again, a service industry poem, is titled Barmaid's Elegy. In the mirror time, a painstaking sculptor chiseling cracks on my once smooth marble face. The young women who work here remind me of the power they have that gently taps, then ships away. Girls, when I modeled, I'd stride into parties wearing cat eyes, and I could feel the room's energy shift. I was a prism. I danced rainbows across the floor that nobody dared catch. I started conversations and then dropped them. I've slipped from those iridescent skins. Because in this world, there is nothing that is not beautiful or that will last. So memorize each sunset and expect it to hurt. Humility is an ocean you've yet to navigate. Love is allowing yourself to be wrong. And beauty is not just in your infinity gold-shaped glasses, but in everyone behind them. And forever has nothing to do with us. And so that was kind of an intriguing coworker of mine at the time who did indeed used to model. It was very beautiful, but also seemed a bit sad, beautifully sad, albeit. But okay, to piggyback off of that one, what forever means. For some lovers, two parallel lines drawn smoothly through time by God's hand until he can't keep his wrist steady or his pen dries up, so one of them runs out of ink. And one partner tries to pencil the other back to life, reads a story from her youth while she lies half awake as a somber hospice hovers. For others, forever is two lives chiming together and then ending days apart softly as a bell with a broken tongue. Your once dashing father shrink into his couch beside your mother, unable to speak aside from a blurred whisper. Alice, take me home. I want to die at home. And somewhere there's a woman whose husband tenderly pulls back her robe like a curtain to caress her twin mastectomy scars. So what does forever mean to us? Could it mean you at 70 and I at 50, taking your blood pressure, counting your pills, or myself, still nubile, never having been good, leaving you for a younger man whose hands are a poem? Forever could even be you now, past middle-aged, yet handsome enough to make women gape, leaving me for the blonde postmistress and her convertible, and I, never good as we've already established, driving you to her. But could forever be us in 20 years, trundling our cart down the supermarket's bright aisles, still bonding over our dislike for croutons, still arguing over generic versus organic eggs. At night, still floating in bed, a tangle of limbs and torsos, and I'm still asking for permission I don't need to cry into the confessional scream of your chest, while the sheets sail us into the smooth waves of sleep. Holding my waist like a mast, you struggle against the day's siren song, and it sings so loud that it drowns out the question. So I can't ask you about forever, but instead allow it to linger in our air. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So my book is dedicated to my late great friend, Joe Gavea. He was a poet himself and showed me so much about living as he forged through just an incredibly courageous battle against cancer. And he is no longer with us, at least in the physical form, but my hope is that my book and his book can allow him to continue to live on. So this one is titled Change in Altitude. My plane hurled through empty pockets of turbulence. Next to me, a Muslim woman trained her terrified gaze, clasped her hands and chanted, and just like that, I knew she must know the inevitable truth, that we are all going to die. And so to praise this life as ephemeral, that one more dip could take us all out. We can learn a lot about living from the dying. Right now, my friend has a shadow on his lungs, a dark blip on the radar screen that appeared after 2 years of cancer being in remission. And the doctors are trying to put him back on course. Chemo, radiation, he's trying to keep his arms out stiffly to remain aloft as this nimbus migrates through his chest. And I do not want to stand by and watch this perfectly good human life, led by a perfectly good human, steadily plummet to the ground, or flame gracefully into the ocean, or clumsily taxi to a halt. I do not want to be the fool who prays for him to recover any more than listen to half of my heart breaking off when he tells me he can no longer mount his Harley, which chugged and sputtered like a stoked red dragon. He can only sit in his garage and run his numb fingers over the cool chrome he cannot feel. And I do not want to be the fool suspended in midair with him between life and death, feeling relief when he says, I'm going to say what I want from now on. I could be dead in a year. I can only white knuckle the armrest, praying he will land safely on a light-filled deciduous knoll where trees part like saplings for one more life that will not be replaced by dust, squalling infants, the salt of useless tears. But I have to watch this crone called gravity tear at him with knobby knuckles. And I have to see what comes. The slow chugging, the terrifying halt, what I hope is the soul soaring above cumulus. I'm going to remember the pot we smoked in his van, the caramelized apple pie a la mode we shared with fierce intensity, and the way I gripped his arm, refusing to dig out my fingers, hoping the tiny half moons would light his way to the other side, while the air around us grows thinner and thinner.
Beautiful. I want to read a couple of these questions so that you have,
Sure.
I'm sure you have time to read some more again before we end. And Rick has his questions ready for us.
Yay,
for us,
Rick.
and it's a good question.
Have at
He
it.
says, you are a wonderful, he says, you are a wonderful storyteller, but your poems often feel driven less by narrative than by pressure, by breath, repetition, and accumulation. Can you talk about how you decide when a poem's internal rhythm has done enough work and when it needs disruption or silence instead?
Wow. Rick, that's a really good question. Hang on a minute. Now I want to look at it. All right. Let's see here. That's really good. I want to see it again. Okay. Okay, got it. So you're a wonderful storyteller, but your poems often feel driven less by narrative than by pressure, by breath. This is very poetic, Rick. Repetition and accumulation. Can you talk about how You decide when a poem's internal rhythm has done enough work and when it needs disruption or silence. Um, yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I ever decide on silence until it's done, but one of the things that I will say that I realized, like, that took me a long time to be able to do is being able to manipulate the volume and the emotional intensity and the heat. And so, for example, whereas sure, some poems absolutely can come on strong, they can be like a wash or like a series of like fireworks strewn up together. However, what I realized very quickly was that that way, Rick, that you speak to of pressure on, pressure off, I really began to wonder and think about where my reader is at emotionally, psychologically at each point in the poem and what kind of like line breaks or lexical choices or pauses or withheld narrative. Basically, I began to realize it was the things that I didn't say that were as important as the things that I did say, and that there were going to be different ways that I could manipulate craft that could ramp up the emotional intensity and then turn it down. And so once I began to do that, and once I began to realize that instead of just going bang, 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 being able to like, it's kind of like being a crazy chef, it's like you have your hand on the dial and you can crank it all the way up. You don't want to just like burn everybody right away. Maybe you want to singe them a little, maybe you want to burn them, but then you want to crank it back. So when I began thinking in those terms, then the intensity that you speak of, I learned how to allow it to ebb and flow, so to speak. I hope I answered your question, Rick. Can't really I'm looking at the chat, but um
Deborah says, do you feel any of your poems can be read out loud in a reading, or do you choose specific ones that you feel read better out loud?
oh yeah. So yeah, it's that's a great question. It's often so it depends. It's less about that and it's more about like and I guess this applies more so for in-person readings, but I can even do it on Zoom. And people who've studied with me know this. I'm pretty good at like sensing the mood of the room, what people are feeling. And I kind of try to plan around that. So, for example, I'll plan ahead of time and I'll go, okay, this is cool. This one's funny. This is super emotionally intense. This one kind of takes the pressure off. That whole thing that I was talking about when it comes to like manipulating the heat and everything like that and paying attention to my readers. The same thing goes for my audience as well. So, for example, yeah, I mean, I can sense body language or I can sense energy. So, if I've been going like too strong, too much, maybe it's time for something funny or playful. Maybe it's time for something less dark. Maybe it's time for something quieter. And the other thing that I do try to be sensitive to as well is certain people, and rightly so, if I've written about them and even when they've given their permission, I do recognize that if they're in attendance for the reading and I haven't told them beforehand that I'm going to read a poem about them, then I'll just eliminate that one. It doesn't matter if it's, wonderful to read or something like that. So ethics and privacy also comes into consideration. Because if I didn't have a chance to tell someone, I don't want to just spring that on them. Unless, I mean, I'm trying to think, Rick being an exception because I remember I wrote a guzzle for you, and I know that I 1,000% have your trust and your safety to read that. But other than that, if it's something that's more like personal, then I'll try to opt for something that is not as much. And I see Dr. Bill Barry in the chat. If you don't mind, I would love to answer. Um, so it was really cool how I came up with, well, not, well, it was cool how the workshop helped me come up with my book. So I don't know if anyone's been to the Coleraine Manuscript Conference, but what they do is on the first day, they have you do it. At first, I thought was kind of a weird assignment. They have you take your book and they have you draw a picture without using words of what it's about. And I'm going, oh God, I'm a sucky drawer. What am I going to do? And at the time, hence the thing about titles being labels and stuff like that, I knew that I wanted the book to kind of like be about Joe and the loss of him. So the original title was Change in Altitude. And so I'm sitting there and I'm drawing, a plane, drawing clouds. I'm making a terrible attempt at, drawing Joe, this concept of grief. But then also one of the major images and events that the collection is structured around is not just the Pulse nightclub shooting, but also the concept of mass shootings in general, which unfortunately tend to pervade. And so in the corner, I put the Pulse nightclub, So I put the nightclub and I put Pulse. And I'll never forget it. The workshop leader goes, wow, he's like, how interesting. See, you already just broke the rule. And I was like, no, because like I want to be a good student and I want to occasionally follow rules and everything like that. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you put a word there. You put pulse there. And I was like, holy shit. Like, and I was like, absolutely. And he's like, well, think about that. Because at first I thought, he was kind of like admonishing, but he's like, no, why'd you do that? And I began thinking about it. And the thing about pulse is that it felt so much bigger and multi-textural and all-encompassing. And like I said earlier, not as much of a label. Everyone has a pulse. It's not just about this concrete concept about the Pulse nightclub shooting, but also it's about love, resiliency, death, what makes us tick, what makes us stop, all of those different things. So that exercise, and if you're ever putting together a collection, you should totally try it. From there, the title was born out of that. So that was pretty
We'll
cool.
get out our drawing pencils.
Yeah, it was super fun, even though I felt sad at first because I was like, I did it wrong. But
Okay, one more question, and then we'll
yeah,
have you read to close us out.
sure,
And
sure.
Sage asks, as you've grown as a writer, what has been your favorite feedback that has put you on the path you're on now?
So I think all of the above, like, about like being able to manipulate heat. And at first I was like, whatever, I don't want to manipulate anything. I want to come out strong and leave that way. But that was super important. But I will say, and I would say, yeah, craft is important too, but no, I would say probably the best feedback I had ever gotten was from Marie Howe when I was studying with her at Sarah Lawrence. And she had said, she was quoting from Louise Gluck, and it's that, so poems aren't, it's not a decanting of your personality, meaning we're not just like pouring our autobiography or feelings like into a series of stanzas. So in other words, it's not just like prose with line breaks. So what is the difference? The difference is being able to access metaphor or simile to reach a place of spiritual insight. And what she had said was, and I never forgot it, she said, Maria, this isn't a good thing or a bad. I've just been thinking a lot about your work and you don't do metaphor. She's like, it just is what it is. And I think that it will truly transform your work if you start doing that. And I was like, how do you just start doing metaphor? Like, how do you do this? And I realized once I began doing it that from there, the poems stopped being those shouts. They did start to, and I did start to cognizantly manipulate the heat. But at the same time, understanding that once I was able to access the subconscious that metaphor really lets you tap into, is that there is a realization and an arrival that occurs at the end of the poem that was not there when it was that I began. There's a shift for me. There's a shift for reader. And you really can't make that shit up at the end of the day, frankly. And I would say that that was the most amazing and challenging feedback I've ever received. And it puts me on that path because I never forgot how she said, Maria, you're a really daring writer. And the downside of that is that you can fake people out. You can close things, like really like seemingly like on this strong note and everything is like tied up in a bow. But no, what's the spiritual insight? What's the realization? How do you go beyond that? And I never forgot that. And so it put me on the trajectory I am today because when I do sit down, I'm like, okay, this isn't about a confrontation with myself. This is about an examination of it. And so I took it from there, and there's been a great departure as a result.
There is so much there that is revealing of not only your craft, but also your passion for it. and the soul searching work that you do when you write. That's thank you for sharing that, Maria. All right, let's hear some more of your work to close us out.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, wow, this went fast. I see that we have 4 minutes left, so this is perfect. I was like, oh, I'm running out of poems. I gotta Google myself. So, but no, wonderfully speaking, I'll end with Closer to the Light. And to quote the great Led Zeppelin, what they said about Stairway to Heaven, this is a song of hope because boy, do we need it. Closer to the light. A woman with cancer cells multiplying in her left breast wakes up 1 month later to feel they've dissolved. Her doctor confirms as she learns, speechless, it's gone. A man spends half of his life at the nightclub, squandering his children's college tuition and betting women named Amy. He rises one day, studies the flesh, pouching his eyes, and means it when he says, I've had enough. There's another man in Maine working in a shoe factory who hears a song on the radio and between notes has an epiphany so great that he puts on his hat, drives home, and begins to write and begins to sing. And so maybe, sometimes, this world is mostly good, and your deepest fears cleanse and heal. Sitting alone on the floor one night, you may be grieving the absence of a lover fighting overseas, or a friend who refuses to die from a disease that singes his edges, or lamenting those women shot last week in another tiny, unassuming city. So you flip off the TV, push open your window, and then walk outside. Everyone is lighting candles, another suspect taken into custody, and tonight the world is on fire. The heat so stifling, you're so afraid you can't see or take another breath. Yet that is how every hope is born. Formed from heat and pressure, it smolders and sends up smoke, which we read as saying help, and we do somehow. We still help each other. And so we're here tonight, shoulder to shoulder, coughing, as we stand so close to the fire. But between breaths, we still remember how beautiful it is to breathe. Thank you.
That was stunning. What a beautiful way to end. There are a lot of gorgeous comments in here for you. Deborah says, singes his edges, formed from heat and pressure. How beautiful it is to breathe. That just ends on such a, you can feel that in your bones. It's beautiful. And Kim says, your poems all have a strong pulse, orally and visually, and Deborah agrees. And then there's some more up there that I probably have missed from Deborah and Mark, just some lines in there that you can read, that some of their favorite lines. I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. Is there anything else that you want to say, Maria? I'm going to put your, where you can get her book, where you can pre-order, and where you can follow her on social media. I'm going to repost that for everybody. Are you doing anything else that you want to, any other readings that you want to let people know about or anything?
Yes.
Before they head out?
There are many, but the one that's most soon, it's going to be a reading and an interview, and it will be at the Mill as part of Friday Live for Nebraska Public Media. So it's for Nebraska's NPR. That is the most, shall I say, it's the upcoming one, but there are more on my website as well. So I would love for you to check it out on the events tab because I'm forever adding to it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Okay. Bye-bye.